Hey everyone, my name is Lindsay. Welcome to Love Them Well. Today I'm going to share with you what we are doing in my 7th grade English class to study the novel Anne of Green Gables. If you have not read this book as an adult yet, you need to. It is so good. It is filled with beautiful imagery and language, and it's a story about a girl who takes really rough circumstances and just thinks about them very positively. So I think it's a good message for today and just for being a person and how we can look at things with a positive light. I really do love the character of Anne. Now, my 7th graders all seem to really like the novel. The only thing they say that's negative is that Anne talks too much, which she knows that about herself, so it's okay. She does talk a lot, and it's kind of funny, but we are enjoying this very much. So to study the novel, I have a study guide from the Progeny Press, and it is for grades 5 through 8. There are places where it'll tell you this is what illusion is, and then now look for that in this part of the novel. So not only are you being given comprehension questions to know are you understanding the book, but can you pull figurative language elements out of the novel, and it'll help you study that. So I think it's been a great study guide. I'm not a huge fan of study guides when it comes to novels, because I like to think that we can read them and get stuff out of them just by really good discussion, but I have really enjoyed using this study guide for this novel. One of the questions from the study guide, I reformatted to this beautiful page here where it says that Lucy Maud Montgomery wrote of her deep affection for Prince Edward Island, and it has a passage from her own personal diary and then a passage from Anne of Green Gables, and it uses this beautiful flowery language, which is how she writes, and it's wonderful. So I had this idea. If you look at paint swatches at the store, the names are amazing, and Anne's always coming up with names for things that are better. Like there's one lake in the book that she decides to call the Lake of Shining Waters, and just really fun names that she gives things. She names plants. So, for example, this is not just yellow, it's sun glow. This is not just green, it's lush meadow. This is deep water. This is the color of whale watching. Did you know? This is the color of aloha, of Swiss chocolate, of a cattle drive. So the students used these colors, melting sunset, these color names to write these really beautiful descriptive paragraphs. And I had the students circle when they did use these paint swatch colors. Truly, the students did such a great job using these beautiful descriptive words: soul searching, dust in the valley, midnight, midsummer night, lavender escape. Very fun activity, and for free. We also just did nature journaling that day, so I had the students draw flowers, and I did give them a page that showed them how to draw, and that was just something I pulled out from the internet for free. So they drew flowers and beautiful nature scenes, and so that was really nice because that's something that Anne would totally do, some nature journaling. So I teach each novel we do a little bit different every time. And so for this novel, I'm assigning sections to read, and when they come to class, that was their homework, to read those sections of chapters. And then we have a reading quiz, and it just has a few questions on it for me to know, did they understand the text? And I got those from this study guide. And then there is time for discussion. Sometimes we read out loud, especially the very end of the book. We read those chapters out loud because it's so precious. And then we also had a tea party because she does several tea parties in the book, and I wanted the students to have that experience, if they haven't already, of having a tea party with formal china. I brought in all my china. I borrowed some from different people who didn't mind if it broke, and guess what? None of it broke, so by the students. So it was great. None of the students broke china. It was wonderful. And so we used the formal china, and we had music on, and we had snacks, and it was really fun. Next week, we are spending the whole week, because this is 3 hours long, watching Anne of Green Gables, the one from 1985, I believe. I think so. Oh my goodness. If you haven't seen this version of Anne of Green Gables, it is so good. Sullivan Entertainment presents its multi-award-winning classic. This is just such a good movie, and what's fun about it is straight from here. Word for word sometimes. For every novel that I teach and throughout the whole school year, it is my goal for students to know what figurative language is and how to look for it within the books that they're reading. So Ashley Bible from Building Book Love has really great examples, all for different seasons and holidays, of figurative language quotes that come from real literature. And you can use them as PowerPoint presentations. What I have done is I've printed them off, and I took the label off. Like whatever this is, whatever figurative language this is, I took the label off, and the students had to go around and then use the PowerPoint slides to match it. So here are the definitions. and the words, the terms of what they are, and then they had to go around the room and find those quotes. I think it was fun. I'm not sure if they really enjoyed it, but they will. They'll start enjoying this because we do it for almost every season and holiday, and it's a really great way to review those things and then look for them in here. And then sometimes as homework along with their reading, I had them look for quotes that showed some of these things. Like, so for one example, I said, look for a quote that shows imagery, and they had to write that quote out and then turn that in. And then when we got about halfway through the novel, they chose their favorite quote from what they had gathered so far. And just in case they didn't know what good quotes are, I did have this document here. And by the way, anything I have on here, I will link below. So if you want to do this stuff too, you can. But I have this resource about what makes a good quote from a book. And so then they took their favorite quote and they wrote a quote analysis. This is free on Teachers Pay Teachers from a, let's see, who wrote this? Brainwaves Instruction. I don't know. I got it for free on Teachers Pay Teachers. I will link it below. But what you do is you go through how to write a quote analysis. And then by the time you're to this page, you are writing your rough draft. So it guides you through. Give a quick overview of the text, explain the central idea. So we talked about theme and some of the themes that you could gather from this book. And then the students wrote a quote analysis. And it was their first one, so I haven't graded them yet. I'm getting ready to this weekend. So we'll see how they did, but it's a really great exercise to use a quote and pull a theme from a book and then write about it. And it's only a paragraph. So it's a good activity to do for a book, and we do this throughout the whole school year. It's really important for me when I'm reading to underline, to highlight, to write notes out to the side. I'm reading right now a Louise Penny novel, and I've had a really hard time getting into it because I'm having a hard time knowing who is who and what characters did what. So I actually just started taking notes in the margins and in the front cover, and that is called annotating a text. So I don't know if that comes naturally to most people, so I teach it in my classes, how to annotate a text. And it has this document here has a step-by-step guide. There's no right or wrong way to annotate. It's just a way for your brain to process and take notes on the page. And of course, sometimes we use library books or classroom copies like this, and you can't write in the text. So you would write your own notes in a journal if you were annotating a text on your own. But I gave the students a copy of chapter 31 because that's where we were at the time. And then the students annotated the text. They underlined things they didn't understand. They wrote questions out to the side. They had to have 5 definitions. So they would underline words like dubious, and then they had to look it up. What is dubious? It means hesitating or doubting. Even I had words in this book that I had to look up. What does that mean? So that's a good way to make sure that you're not just going over words and moving on. Like, this is a way to write out in the margin what that term is, and you can grow your vocabulary in that way. And then, so in chapter 31, this student wrote, I want to start my own story club because Anne starts a story club. So she wrote that out to the side. It'd be really fun to do that. This makes me sad, but I'm also happy about this. Slay Marilla, that's one of the things the student wrote because Marilla says, but there, men can't understand these things. And she wrote slay. So just a great way for students to take notes, to learn how to take notes for comprehension and understanding. Anne loves this poem, The Lady of Shalott. It's by Tennyson. And so I printed it off and we are gonna read through this. And here's a picture of The Lady of Shalott. And so we're gonna read it because this book only quotes it. And so it would be fun to see a poem that she actually learned in class that we can read together as a class in our room. And I have heard of people having their students memorize this poem, or at least parts of it, but we're not gonna have time for that. We've been doing so many other things, but it would be really fun to memorize it. I forgot to mention, at our tea party, the students did have to come prepared with a poem to share with the class because Anne does a lot of reading poetry out loud. So they didn't have to memorize it. They just stood in front of the class and said a poem, and they had to bring it and they could read from a sheet. They weren't allowed to have a phone. They had to have it printed off or copied. And so they did that. And then they also got extra credit if they dressed up. And we really had a lot of the kids dress up wearing suits or nice dresses. It was really fun. And tea is cheap. We're gonna do another tea party soon because tea is so cheap. It doesn't cost a lot and it's fun and it just makes things a little more exciting and formal. And then also I bought sugar cubes, which were also relatively cheap as well. So many of them come in a box like this, and I had never bought sugar cubes before, but that I think was even more popular than the tea. And then last but not least, this was the happiest accident of the whole novel. We bought these first. I sent this in to order these for the class copies. I just liked the cover. I did not realize that it wasn't the unabridged version of Anne of Green Gables. It was the graphic novel. But what was the happy accident about this is that I saved a few copies of this, and it's actually really well written. I mean, the pictures are great, obviously, but I wasn't sure that it would actually be of any literary value. It takes quotes directly from this and puts them in here. It's wonderful. It is such a good graphic novel, so well done. It is straight from the text. So after the students had a section that they read, we would then sit in class and I would read them the graphic novel. And I had them all gather around like kindergarten because they needed to be able to see it. It was just so much fun. I think it was a great way to summarize what we had been reading, and it was just a blast. I really like this book, and I'll put it in our library here because I've had students ask if they could read it, but I said not yet because I didn't want them to skip ahead and find out what happens at the end. Beautifully done. I have really enjoyed reading this novel with my students so far this year. It's the first thing we did right out the gate. I didn't do any grammar, any writing except the assignments that came along with these books. We're gonna start all of that when we are finished studying this novel. And pretty soon in the year, we're gonna start Tom Sawyer, and then we will be comparing and contrasting the novels because Tom Sawyer is very similar to Anne. They're both orphans. They both are around the same time period, and I think it'll be really fun to look at that perspective of this young boy who is a little bit crazy and a little bit wild. She is too, but in a different way. So it'll be fun to compare and contrast those stories. If you have studied this novel with your classes, I would love to hear your ideas below. Or if you just have a fun idea of something that would be cool to do with Anne of Green Gables, let me know. Put it in the comments below. And again, all of this I will link in the description box. I hope you guys are all having a great day. I will see you next time. Bye.